Many anticipated this Spanish race, expecting flexi-wings to significantly impact and challenge the leading teams. But what we've found today is that things haven't changed as much as many would have expected, and McLaren is still unstoppable. Spain concludes this Formula 1 triple header, further solidifying McLaren's lead in the championships. Quite strange situations, and what seems to be a head-to-head battle for the title between the McLaren men. But we have to tell you about that in this video. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the recap of the 9th round of the Formula 1 World Championship, the Spanish Grand Prix. Before we start with the recap, first, let's go over the damage report before the race. Lance Stroll unfortunately missed the Grand Prix. Due to pain in his hand, which seems to be a result of that incident he had in 2023, and his participation in the Canadian race at this point is not certain. On the other hand, although it doesn't really change anything, Yuki Tsunoda will start from the pit lane due to changes in the setup, breaking parc fermé. What can I say? It wouldn't change anything because they would just move him from starting in last position to starting from the pit lane. The 2025 star driver dominated qualifying. Oscar Piastri wanted the pole position, beating his teammate by 2/10 and Max Verstappen by 3/10, the last challenger in this qualifying session. However, for the race, with such a long run to the first corner, that first turn could bring us anything. So all that was left to see was if Piastri would win, if Norris could do something to stop his teammate, or if Verstappen would pull off one of his moves in the opening meters of this race. And once the cars lined up on the starting grid, the lights would go out. And with that, the Spanish Grand Prix would begin. Piastri's start was brutal, not giving anyone a chance to take his position. Norris had a poor start and was overtaken by Verstappen, who moved up to second place, while Norris dropped to third after being attacked by Verstappen and Russell. The first corner was mostly uneventful, with only minor incidents occurring. Several drivers gained positions, with Hamilton moving up to P4, Leclerc to P5 and Hülkenberg to 11th place. Next, it was time to observe the race pace. And quickly, Red Bull showed more degradation than the Papaya team's drivers. In the initial laps, Ferrari drivers battled until lap 10 neutralized it. They asked Hamilton to let Leclerc pass, as he had a much better pace at that moment. And some drivers made very early pit stops, like Gasly, Hülkenberg or Carlos Sainz. However, Norris caught up to Verstappen by lap 11 and overtook him on lap 13, practically without the Dutchman being able to do anything to defend himself. Given the situation, they opted for a 3-stop strategy. And on the following lap, he was one of the first among the leading group to pit for another set of soft tires. The McLarens didn't react to Verstappen's early pit stops and stayed out on track for a while. The Ferrari drivers pitted on laps 17 and 18 while Mercedes kept Russell out until lap 21. And it wasn't until lap 22 that Norris came into the pits for his first stop, switching to the medium tire, and Piastri followed him a lap later to also switch to the medium tire. Verstappen briefly led the race, benefiting from fresher, softer tires for a few laps. But he would soon need his second pit stop, so McLaren would inevitably take the lead. Meanwhile, there were battles like Lawson overtaking Albon in the corner with minor contact. Also, there was contact at the race start in turn 1, which I didn't mention earlier. Albon had to change his front wing, and the same incident happened again. He damaged his front wing. Albon ended up getting a 10-second penalty, and after serving the penalty, Williams decided to retire the car. We also saw a small mistake from Alonso without any consequences and some interesting battles, but outside of the points. So we were forced to go back to what was happening at the front of the grid. In that span of laps, McLaren was taking a lot of time out of Max Verstappen each lap, since unlike the Dutch driver, they were going for a strategy of only 2 pit stops, but maintaining the pace long enough and doing it quite well. And since the McLarens were taking time out of him, by lap 29, would he trigger the second pit stop? Fitting the medium tire, aiming for 3 stops, because making it to the end with 36 laps on that tire looked pretty complicated for Max Verstappen. Leclerc and Russell pitted during the chasing laps, but didn't appear to threaten Verstappen's 3rd place. So in the end, it seemed like the podium would stay that way. But we still had to see what Verstappen would do with his 3rd stop, and it would finally come on lap 48, now leaving Norris within reach of an undercut, since Max had closed the gap to just 4 seconds. So a lap later, McLaren brings him in and he comes out ahead of the Red Bull driver. Up to this point, the race seemed completely settled and nothing else was going to happen outside of what was already established on the grid. But what none of us expected was that Mercedes, unintentionally, would bring some excitement, at least to the final laps of this race. The German engine of Kimi, Antonelli and Fenicio failed, stranding them in the gravel trap. And this would bring out the safety car, which would shake up this race a bit because many drivers went into the pits, including the leaders Piastri and Norris, Verstappen, Leclerc, Russell and Hamilton. But since Verstappen had used up all his soft tire sets, he only had hard tires left to put on during this stop. And the hard tires were the worst tire in this race basically because they couldn't get up to temperature and keeping them there was even harder. Personally, I think Red Bull made a mistake, not because of the tire, since as I said they didn't have any other option, but because I think they should have gambled on leaving him out. Let him take the lead and hold on as best he could. With the hard tire he struggled, and when the safety car emerged on lap 60, we promptly verified it. In the last corner, he nearly lost control, allowing Leclerc to overtake him with a touch on the straight, igniting the Dutch driver's fury. Joe Russell also attacks him, taking the inside line, and where both have a small contact with which Max ends up going off the track to defend his position. Red Bull appears to have concluded that Russell secured the apex and completed the overtake. So they asked Verstappen to give up the position to avoid a 10-second penalty. And that's where, oh yes, ladies and gentlemen, after such a long time, Osama bin Verstappen returned, who did give up the position. But suddenly, he remembers the 0.0000001% of Taliban he has in his blood and decides to go after Russell. Bile swiftly throws the car at him in a typical swipe, where, obviously because of this, they gave him a 10-second penalty that would drop him back to 10th place at the end of this race. In a complete disconnect from Verstappen, caused by the anger that fired him up during the restart. And this was really the highlight of the race, but the last thing we had left was Nico Hülkenberg, who was having a superb race. Before the pit stops, he was in the points, thanks to a great pace and a well-executed strategy. In the final laps, he overtook Lewis Hamilton, moving up to 6th and finished 5th after Verstappen's penalty. Being one of the best races I've seen from the German driver in Formula. But when lap 66 arrived, Oscar Piastri would cross the finish line, winning the race and thus extending his lead in the drivers' standings. Oscar Piastri secured his 5th win of the season, resuming his dominant run toward his first World Championship after 2 challenging races. A race dominated from start to finish where he gave practically no one a chance. He widens the lead over his teammate in the drivers' standings again today. And it's scary to think about what might come next. Because this definitely won't be the last victory for the Australian in this 2025 season. The rest of the top 10 in the Spanish Grand Prix would finish as follows. Norris finished 2nd, Leclerc 3rd in a solid race, and Russell 4th, somewhat saving the day. 5th place and a standing ovation for Nico Hülkenberg, 6th place and a disappointing race for Lewis Hamilton. 7th place for Isaac Hattier, 8th place for Pierre Gasly, 9th place for Alonso, scoring his first points of the year, and closing the top 10 Max Verstappen, who even dropped down due to the penalty. Today's race has been the typical one you get at the Circuit of Spain, a strategic race with not many position changes, especially at the front. But at least this year's had a bit of spark. Especially at the end, with the safety car and Verstappen's tantrums, which made for at least an entertaining finish. But overall, the races here are what they are. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't the best in the world either, so my rating will be 6.5, entertaining. And now we have to wait 2 weeks for the action to return at the Canadian circuit at the Gilles Villeneuve. My drivers of the day this time are Oscar Piastri and Zach Hare, but especially Nico Hülkenberg. The race he delivered today was superb. He advanced from the start, managed the race effectively, and finished with a stunning overtake on Lewis Hamilton. Today, Hulk has pulled Sauber out of the pit. They leave the last spot in the Constructors' Championship, and who knows if they can keep it. But at least what happened today deserves a standing ovation. And as I said, one of the best races I've seen from Nico Hülkenberg in his Formula career. My disappointment of the day is Max Verstappen, who once again shows that his greatest weakness is his temperament. The team's strategy was flawed by putting him on hard tires and asking him to give up his position to Russell without penalizing hhim. But losing his composure like that is what cost him. The 10 seconds cost 24 points in the championship compared to Piastri. Now with a 49-point lead, making a comeback in the best car. Well, I think it's time for Max to start dusting off number 33 because it looks difficult for him to turn this situation around in this 2025. And ladies and gentlemen, with this we finish the summary of the Spanish Grand Prix 2025 of Formula. But I want to know your opinion. How would you rate this Grand Prix? And of course, let me know who your drivers of the day were and your disappointments of the day from this Spanish Grand Prix 2025. Let me know all your opinions in the comments section. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Goodbye. Subscribe to this channel, turn on notifications so you know when I'm uploading a new video, and share this with your friends. I also invite you to follow us on our Instagram and Twitter accounts. The links are in the video description. And I'll see you soon for more content here on your Skyline Racing channel. Thanks for tuning in. See you later.